Hello and welcome back to this series of videos on learning support for autistic children and young people. And thank you for visiting the North Somerset Educational Psychology Service Training Library. Today we're going to look at some of the practical top tips for learning support, and in particular we're going to focus on specific activities we can use in early years settings to help autistic children develop skills that will help them to learn. Rather than talking about how to add up or how to write their name, we are looking at the underlying skills which help children develop these academic skills, and therefore we might call them skills for learning. If you enjoy this video, please also watch our video on creating autism-aware learning environments for young people with social communication difficulties and autism. Also, don't forget to check out our resources page at the EPS Training Library, which features links to all the resources we mention here, plus examples of further training. Before we look at some specific games and activities, let's start by considering which types of skills autistic children tend to struggle with in the classroom or playroom. And these are executive functioning and social cognition. Executive functioning refers to skills which help us manage our time and attention and organization. This includes skills like filtering out distractions, maintaining our focus on a single task at a time, planning the steps involved in a task, prioritizing which bits are most important, thinking flexibly, and controlling our impulses. Social cognition refers to our understanding of other people, including predicting their behavior, what they might be thinking or feeling, and knowing how we can join in with them in group tasks. So let's take a closer look at executive functioning and some of the activities we can use to develop children's executive functioning skills, including attention games, impulse control games, and pretend play. Firstly, we can help children in the early years develop their ability to pay attention and ignore distractions by using listening and attention games. We can do this using a range of classic games like musical statues, Snap, and Copy My Clapping. With all attention games, we're aiming to help children develop their ability to control their attention. We might start by doing this in a one-to-one situation with an adult, and then moving on to doing it in a small group, for example using bucket time activities or a more structured program like Attention Autism, which is being demonstrated in this video. We want to make it fun and rewarding to listen carefully and pay attention. In particular, for young people with social communication difficulties, we want to make it rewarding for them to share attention with us on an object or an activity. Next, we can help children in the early years develop their control over their behavior using impulse control games. Some common examples include Follow the Leader, Red Light, Green Light, What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, and Simon Says. Impulse control games are all about helping children manage their own behavior. If we can make it fun and rewarding for children to have to stop and think, we teach them a valuable skill of controlling their impulses. During Simon Says, for example, we have to combine impulse control with listening carefully to instructions, which is why it's been such a popular children's game for so many years. And now let's look at some games and activities which help children develop social cognition, which is their understanding of how other people behave and expect us to behave. The first example of this is imitation or copying games. These games have a variety of forms, from copying movements like waving, to copying the way we arrange toy animals in a barnyard, to copying the way we build towers with blocks. We might start teaching imitation games by copying the way children play. When they have noticed that we are copying them, we might change our actions and see if they begin to copy us. This process is the central idea in programs called Identiplay and Intensive Interaction. As we can observe in the video, adults can use imitation games to introduce reciprocal, back and forth versions of turn-taking. Many students with social communication difficulties or autism prefer solitary forms of play, so Identiplay and intensive interaction are great ways of teaching them that playing with a partner can be a safe and fun thing to do. As the child's play becomes more complex, the opportunities for Identiplay become even more sophisticated, and we can demonstrate new ways to play with toys. Next, we have the example of pretend play, which can help students learn about rules and expectations during social interactions. When they use imaginary play, children develop rules to guide their actions in playing roles. It's useful when pretend play involves costumes and props, and especially helpful when children are allowed to play different roles in the same scenario, for example, both acting as the doctor and the patient. The children in this rather old video from the Department for Education are role-playing a game of travel agents. Each one of them has a chance to experience a different role, including a more leadership-type role as the salesperson and a supportive role as the note-taker. Role-playing teaches children rules and social expectations, and then reinforces the lessons by allowing the children to experience them firsthand. The final example we have of an everyday early years activity is storytelling. There are loads of classic books that teach children about important social skills, like sharing, or emotional skills, like overcoming fears. And there are more specific stories about situations that are likely to come up in the classroom, like stories about putting our hands up or separating from our parents. Like pretend play, stories help children learn about different roles, rules, and consequences. We can also encourage older children to create their own stories, for example by telling turn-taking group stories where each child adds a new event to the last one or takes turns to come up with an alternative ending to a familiar story. Social stories are especially useful for students with social communication difficulties, as they use visual symbols and pictures alongside simple language to reinforce key messages about social expectations. There are a range of pre-written social stories available online, as well as tools which help us write our own social stories for specific situations. For example, social stories about washing our hands, or class rules like no throwing. The beauty of social stories is that they are simple and highly visual, which means they can apply to any situation that a child with social communication difficulties will encounter at preschool or school. So in summary, many of the classic games and activities we use in early year settings teach children vital thinking and social skills. And if we can add a slight twist on them, for example using an attention bucket instead of handing toys to students, or a social story instead of a traditional storybook, we can make them even more useful for autistic students. Attention games, impulse control games, imitation games, pretend play, and storytelling are all activities that we can use in our early years settings for free with no specific training to develop the executive functioning and social cognition skills of children with social communication difficulties and autism. And when we build these activities into our daily and weekly routines, whether we're doing them one-to-one, in small groups, or as a whole class, we're helping students with ASC develop the skills they need for lifelong learning. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you found this video useful.